What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Plaisance Podcast. In this episode, I will be talking about the college football playoffs with my good friends Cameron and Carden from the Saturdays in the SEC podcast. Be sure to go check them out. The link is in the description. They have a great channel, and they know more about the SEC than anyone I've ever met. So stay tuned for this episode. Be sure to look at our other ones as well. And thanks again for watching. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. The Alabama Crimson Tide and what their outlooks on the college football playoff are. First up, let's talk about the game versus Oklahoma, right? This is going to be a road test, a game that they've already played once. Cameron, first of all, tell me what your outlook on this game specifically is. How do you think Alabama fares on the road in Norman?
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back and looking at the first matchup, I think it's going to be a lot of the same factors that we saw in that first meeting in Tuscaloosa. Alabama almost doubled up Oklahoma in total yardage, but 3 critical turnovers. That's something that's got to change this weekend in Norman for Alabama to have a chance. They got dominated in special teams in that game. We saw the clip with Connor Talty missing the field goal, and obviously get into it with long snapper a little bit. Tate Sandell, on the other hand, for Oklahoma, was booming them from Northport. I mean, he was hitting them left and right. They dominated that facet of the game, such a hidden part of the game a lot of times. And then field position. Oklahoma started, I believe, 3 or 4 drives in Alabama territory in Tuscaloosa. Alabama, pretty much every drive was inside their own 25. So that's something. That's what we saw last week against Georgia as well. Field position dominated by Georgia, dominated by Oklahoma the first time. So those are 3 areas that I'm looking at that Alabama's got to get some of those, if not all of them, back in their favor, specifically the turnovers. I think if Alabama doesn't turn the ball over, it's going to be tough sledding all night. But if they don't turn it over, I think that's going to put them with a chance in the fourth quarter to have a chance to get it done. It's going to be ugly. I anticipate that. I don't think either offense is going to have a ton of success in the game, but I think it's going to come down to those 3 factors, and who can win those phases, I think, will ultimately dictate who wins this game.
Yeah, I kind of agree. The thing that worries me the most about this game, like you said, is the special teams. And while I do think they can be fixed, I guess what I'm worried about is this theme throughout the season. When we were watching the games early on and they win versus Georgia, right? I'm like gleefully surprised that Alabama was able to go in on the road to arguably the best team in the country now and win, right? But we see that repeated throughout the season. Missouri, South Carolina, LSU, Vanderbilt, some miscues throughout the game. Not that they didn't win these games, right? They won all of these games, and it's hard to win in the SEC. But there's just been something about this Alabama team that, to me, has a lot of red flags. I mean, and I think almost every, general analyst in the country can point that out. But Carden, tell me what you see, I guess, wrong with this Alabama team before. I know you might be a little hopeful about their chances, but what do you think they have to solve the most going into Friday's matchup versus Oklahoma?
100% would be, like Cameron alluded to, the turnovers and obviously being able to run the ball. Now, their last 2 games of the regular season, they ran it a lot better than they did. Now, one of them was against Eastern Illinois or whatever that team was, so it wasn't a great product they were going against. But then they ran the ball really well against Auburn, who pretty much all season stopped the run. Obviously, the turnovers, 4 of their last 5 games, they had multiple turnovers or a turnover or more. Except for the Iron Bowl, and then you saw them, they went on to win that game, and their offense looked really good early. So I think that's the key 100% is offense, getting started, being able to run the ball, not at will, but just, running it and staying with the run where it's not, 3 or 4 yards a carry, here and there, making sure that you stay consistent with that. And then obviously the turnovers, because like I just said, 4 of their last 5 games, turnovers were a big issue for them. And I think, again, not an offensive coordinator, never claimed to be, but I feel like Ty Simpson does a little too much pre-snap. It seems like every play he's changing something. I think that they need to call it and run it here and there. Obviously there's certain things. If you got a certain coverage, you're going to change things. but it feels like he's relying a little too much on that. Earlier in the season, it worked, and it worked fine. There was no complaints. But then the back half of the season, it started giving him troubles, in my opinion. I think he relies a little too much on that instead of trusting what he's got. And so I think that you're not going to see him making as many checks at the line is what I think is going to happen. And then I don't think that there's going to be multiple turnovers. If they turn it over one time, they're fine. Honestly, if they would have just made a field goal, they still would have won against Oklahoma the last time with 3 turnovers. Obviously, turnovers are a big deal, like Cam mentioned, field position. But I don't think that it's just the end of the world, end-all, be-all, if there is a turnover in the game, because Mateer is very prone to turning the ball over as well. Alabama's defense has been playing really well the last few weeks. I don't think that one turnover is going to kill Alabama, because I think that they're going to force 1, maybe 2 against Oklahoma as well. But for sure, the run game needs to get going, and Ty just needs to settle in, trust what the coaches call, and let it rip. I feel like, in the SEC championship game, granted, they had like 13 or 14 pressures. He was throwing off his back foot a little bit. He didn't really seem comfortable in the pocket. I get it. They were running intermediate to deeper routes. They really weren't giving him options to get rid of it quick. And when they did, they couldn't catch it. I feel like the running back pass game wasn't effective in the SEC championship game. They had several drops out of the backfield. Jam Miller's back at practice this week. He's expected to play. So I think, getting the ball out of Ty's hands quickly, letting him settle in, get comfortable in the game, I think is going to bode well for the last half of that game, especially, allowing him to see, okay, what we got going, I can do. I'm still the guy who was performing this well the first 6 weeks of the season. I can get back to that. I think they're going to try and get things going quickly. Some elementary stuff, if you want to say, to get him back settled in and get his confidence built back up and ready to go.
You struck gold in my own mind there when you were talking about Ty Simpson making those checks. I remember violently screaming during the Iron Bowl. Like he does it all the time. I completely agree with you. I think the coaching staff gave him way too much say in how the offense is run. But I think that was based off of, like you said, how he played at the beginning of the season, right? He looked like a poised, seasoned veteran quarterback. But as the year went on, right, it didn't look like he was lucky in the first half of the season, but he looked like he was way more dependent on the initial game plan of the coaching staff. I think that they got away from that later on in the year. That's why they have really started to struggle. And that could also be due to a lot of injuries. Cameron, I think you could probably speak to this best. This Alabama team has been, I think, relatively one of the most banged up teams in the SEC. Tell me what you think about Alabama trying to be as healthy as possible, or what does Alabama look like right now, basically, in terms of injury updates?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a very fair point as far as their injuries go. They've definitely been banged up, specifically over the last month or so. Like Carden said, I think getting Jam Miller back will be very helpful. And I thought, honestly, that early in that Iron Bowl was probably the best he's looked all year. Mm-hmm. I thought some of those runs, because this is an Alabama offense that has had 0 explosive runs. I thought he had 1 or 2 that, they weren't huge gains, but it was a positive sign for Alabama's offense. I think getting him back will help. I think a lot of people are starting to realize how big of an impact he has, and that's Josh Cuevas. I mean, he's been a huge part of this offense. I think a guy that Ty Simpson has a ton of trust in. And some of the younger tight ends have done well at times, but I just think the combination of his receiving, his blocking, just the leadership and the experience that he has out there, I think just that kind of that safety net for Ty Simpson, I think if he's back and looks like he's going to play, I think that'll be a big help as well. And then some guys that played late in the year but really, truly weren't 100%. Jeremy Bernard's been banged up. Parker Brailsford's a huge part of this offense at the center position. He hasn't been 100%. I think he's going to be closer to that in this game. So I think a combination of those factors should help things out. But, like Carden said as well, too, the pressure, I think Ty was so confident early in the year. I thought the pockets were cleaner at times early in the year. I think as the pressure has ramped up and they've played much tougher defenses down the stretch as well. Yep. I think as that pressure's ramped up, I think that's hurt his confidence, not having as much success and like you said, having a lot on his plate, trying to check things at the line of scrimmage constantly. It's really, and I think the coaching staff deep down knows they've had more on his plate than really he should have. But when you don't have a running game and you don't really have a vertical passing game, they're just trying to do what was best to win.
Right.
The intermediate passing game's all they had. So that's kind of what they had to roll with. I think deep down, they know it was too much for him. And, hopefully in the future, I don't know if it'll be this year, but I think they'll get more of the pieces in place where that's not quite the case so much going forward.
Yeah, I think that's my main concern. Like you said, Cuevas is a massive part of that intermediate passing game. So even to hone in and focus on that later on in the season, because you basically don't have any other things. I can't remember off the top of my head in the last 30 seconds if you mentioned Ryan Williams also being consistently banged up this year with didn't he have a concussion early on in the season?
He got rocked against Florida State over the middle. Honestly, since that play, it feels like he's not scared, but he's expecting the big hit. And then over the middle, I feel like he's not as confident as he needs to be going over the middle.
Yeah, he's had a huge problem with drops this season. I think it was in the Auburn game. He had that corner shot in the end zone. I mean, he hit him right in the chest. But, I mean, Kirk Herbstreit basically called it out on tape or live on air and was saying, yeah, he's never really been a hands guy. And I guess he's right about that. So Alabama's got some major offensive issues, in my opinion, that they've got to solve. And I think, like you said, Cameron, a lot of it has to do with health. So is this Alabama team going to be healthy? I guess it's positive outlook, but I guess we'll have to see just how quote unquote healthy they truly are come Friday night. So speaking of Friday night, Carden, we'll start with you. Official predictions. Tell me what you think.
I think Alabama wins because, like we've just mentioned, with how bad they were offensively in the turnover margin, they still only lost by 2. I know it's at Norman. It's a little different. I just don't see turnovers being as big of a factor for Alabama, not in the sense that it's not a big factor. I don't think that it's going to be as common. I don't see them turning the ball over 3 times this week. Special teams, yeah. Talty's been a little better the last few weeks of the season. You're not going to win playoff games or win the national championship and battle in the playoff games with field goals. You're going to have to get it in the end zone. Bama is able to drive the length of the field. We've seen them do it several times. Didn't really do it against Georgia. In my opinion, that's the best team in college football right now. So it's not like that's a huge knock or anything. But they've played this team before. I said it last week when me and Cam were reviewing the SEC championship game. It is so hard to beat a quality team twice in 1 year, let alone in 5 weeks. I just don't know that Oklahoma is built offensively to be able to go in there and beat Alabama again. So for that reason, I like Alabama because they were so close when playing so bad offensively. They were so close. Like Cam said, they outgained them. This Alabama offense, I felt like, gave this Oklahoma defense the most trouble of anybody all season. Even though they came out with a win, they put up 406 yards, 326 passing yards. They outgained them. They had 9 more minutes time of possession. They were better on all assets except for the turnover margin. I expect that same thing to happen offensively. Just take away the turnovers. I like Alabama to win this. Not comfortably like a 20-point win like the SEC championship game, but I like a touchdown to a 10-point victory for Alabama. Because Bama shows up in the postseason. They've been there before. It's nothing new to them. I'm not really high on Mateer. I haven't been since really he got hurt against Auburn. Wasn't super high on him before that. He was, trending in a great direction. But since his hand injury, man, he just hasn't been the same. Had 3 turnovers against LSU. This Bama defense is better than the LSU defense. I like Alabama to win this game.
All right, let's hear it, Cameron. What you got?
I'm rolling with Alabama too. I mean, I'm not crazy confident. Like if I'm putting odds, I'm saying like 55-45 Alabama's way. I do think Alabama can get the turnovers corrected. I think if they can go in, like Carden said, with no turnovers preferably, but one, at least have it even. Just keep special teams even too. I don't expect them to out special teams Oklahoma, but you can't be in as bad a field position as you were in the first game, like you were against Georgia last week. Make your kicks if you're Connor Talty. I know Tate Sandell's going to make his kick, so just try to match them. there, and just kind of limit the hidden yardage with special teams too. Like the punting game for Alabama hasn't been great this year. You got a punt blocked in the SEC championship. That's things you can't have happen in these types of games against these types of opponents. So I think Alabama's offense is going to be a little bit better in this game. Like I said, limit the turnovers. I don't think either offense is going to move it particularly great. I'm not really confident in Oklahoma's offense moving it on this Alabama defense either. Like Carden said, John Mateer threw for over 300 against LSU, but threw 3 picks. Alabama's one of 3 teams this year that's thrown for over 300 on Oklahoma. It was Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Alabama. Oklahoma won 2 of those games, but they won the turnover margin in both those games. The one they lost to Ole Miss, they lost the turnover margin. If Alabama can win the turnover margin in this game, I think it's going to go a long way. So I'll lean Alabama slightly. Think it's going to be not aesthetically pleasing. It's going to be low scoring. It's going to be grinded out, points at a premium. But I'll go Alabama like 20-17. I think it's really close. I think it's, like I said, going to be low scoring, going to be ugly. But I think they find a way. Both teams in this playoff, just not only in this game, but going forward for whoever wins, they kind of have to win a similar way. It's kind of a thin margin of error, a thin margin of error type of football for them to win. There's a path there. It's not as wide as some of those other teams, but if they can kind of stay on that path perfectly, I think they got a chance to make a little noise, but it's maybe not as wide as some of the other teams in this playoff.
Yeah, so I'll get into this in just a little bit when we talk about Oklahoma. Be sure to check out that episode, guys. But I'm going to be rocking with Oklahoma in this game. And the way that I look at it is we have seen Alabama, in my opinion, outside of the Florida State game, respond pretty well to adversity this year, right? The being down late against South Carolina on the road, they go out and win it, right? Missouri was a game that I didn't think was going to be relatively close, and Alabama ends up having to pull off some late game heroics to win that game. You think about the game versus Oklahoma, right? You go down big after getting the pick 6, you miss the field goal in the first half, you have tons of penalties, multiple turnovers, and in the second half, Alabama actually looked, in my opinion, like the better team for the majority of that second half. I guess what I am the most concerned about is this is going to be an extremely hostile environment. Obviously it's on the road. You got to travel. You're banged up and it's freezing cold. It's going to be cold as hell. And Oklahoma, this, in my opinion, is their environment, obviously at home, but in terms of a slop fest, gritty, physical game, I think Brent Venables probably does that better than any other coach in the SEC. And then I look at the play. Once I start thinking that, I'm thinking, okay, this is a defensive game. And Alabama's defense is great. But when I look at the playmakers on Alabama's defense, do I think that they're better than Oklahoma's? And that's kind of where I say I think Oklahoma wins, right? A lot of this also depends on R. Mason Thomas. I know he's coming back to practice this week, questionable for the game on Friday. If he plays, I'm fairly confident Oklahoma wins it with ease. But I look at like Marvin Jones Jr., the Bowen brothers, Robert Spears Jennings, and I think that those guys end up being the ones that win it. Ty Simpson on the road in a game where Oklahoma probably takes away the run game. Can he win it? Absolutely. He can win it, but will I put my emotions behind it? I'm really trying not to.